so excited, and like I'm not lying. I'm so excited. This is my favorite subject matter, things to talk about, and it's what I've been learning difficultly for the past decade since I started on a spiritual journey that has a lot to do with plant medicine for me, because I was an ADHD kind of sufferer who was never medicated. I didn't really complain about things. I watched my brother get put on a lot of medicines, and I watched him have real difficulty with it. And actually, when my brother was having difficulty towards the end, he was turning to cannabis so that he could sleep and he could eat, because the medicine he was on, he couldn't eat. And when they saw the effect it had on them, everybody in the family kind of went, Jesse needs to have some marijuana. He's too high strung. And I ended up, partaking in California where it's legal, so I was able to go get a prescription and, take it like medicine. And it was this huge relief for me because I had anxiety my whole life. I was all the time. And I didn't even know that until it wasn't like that anymore. And I was like, oh, great, this is relief. So from that place of relief, I started to really explore things. And because of my positive response to the cannabis, I remembered something that Steve Jobs had told me. And Steve Jobs had said, not to me personally, but in one of his books, he said that he would not have invented Apple computers if not for an LSD trip in college. And I was a very stark atheist, and this is why I want to tell you this, because I was such a stark atheist that I don't think anything but this experience could have stopped me from just believing that everything was just nothing. And that when I died, oblivion. I used to have nightmares about oblivion. When I was a child, I would wake up in the middle of the night sobbing, why is there anything? I don't understand. Really wrestling with tough subject matter, and I had a very, there's nothing. But when I researched LSD, which is synthetic, I saw that there were a lot of favorable comparisons with magic mushrooms, which is psilocybin. And that had been tested in more ways that I liked. And I read about it. It said drink a lot of water and have this experience. And when I did, the very, very first experience that I had, which is the first experience of the universal law. And I had never felt anything quite so powerfully, except maybe when later I was eventually visited by a dead friend in a deep meditation. But the law of one is what you are taught immediately on a substance like psilocybin or ayahuasca. The reason why psilocybin does this so well is because psilocybin is this network of neural pathways that just sort of form together in these perfect geometric shapes. And they've done some really interesting studies with them in Japan, where they had put these mushroom spores into a shaping of the subway system. And in 24 hours, the spores had made a more efficient energy transmission system than the Japanese had. And this was a very ambitious project where they had put their engineers to this for many years, and the mushrooms overnight were like, nah, here's a better way, let's do it like this. And that is what happens when you have the psilocybin experience. You feel this sort of oneness. Your left and right hemispheres of your brain connect. So it's very easy to have the experience of oneness. And that's really what I want to talk about right now. There are a lot of ways to get to that oneness, but honestly for me, I was too blocked. So it was this sort of overwhelming experience of education when the psilocybin kicked in, and I went, oh my goodness, everything is one. I'm one with this. I can feel everything. I'm one with it all. But if you get into heightened states of meditation, you can have very similar experiences. And if you read about yogis, like the biography of a yogi or something like that, you'll find experiences about an all-encompassing oneness. Now, I want to talk about the oneness in a couple ways before we get into some of the other ones, just because it is so important. And the oneness is all-encompassing. And what I mean by that is, what do we think of as something really low? Like, let's say an ant, right? So an ant, and we'll just make some little antennas and some little legs. We got an ant, and then we got a scale here, and in the middle we'll say humans, right? And then all over here, we'll say God, the universe. Sorry, this is the wrong marker that I picked up. The universe is a good one. Whatever you like. It doesn't matter what you think of as the totality of everything, but whatever you want to call it. The oneness represents that and that. A rock, the grass. When Jehovah's Witnesses come to my house now, I used to have such a terrible reaction when people would tell me I was going to hell, or that I had to do this or had to do that. And now when they go, have you been saved by Christ? I go, yes. Have you been saved by the grass and the rocks and the fire and the air and the sun and everything? My friend, me, my babies, you need to be saved by it all. You need to humble yourself to everything, because everything is one and you are everything. And you're just humbling yourself to yourself, because until you do so, you're button up against yourself. It's just you. You're fighting with yourself. And the idea of oneness has to, first and foremost, remind us, whatever's happening, you did it. You did it. You did it. I did it. And it's a hard thing to accept that. Nobody wants to accept that, because so often it's very difficult to see, well, how did I do this? I didn't have anything to do with this. At this moment, there is energy that lives on long after you and will continue. And in some other incarnation, and we're going to get into this thing because one of the laws is the infinite perpetual transmutation of energy, and that means many lives, many incarnations, as grass, as rocks, as birds, as everything. We are essentially one thing. Like, if you want to look at reincarnation another way, the way I like to look at it sometimes is, you ever see those paper mache children? You can cut them together and, oh, we got our hands held and, oh, we're all one. Paper mache guys, right? So we tend to think of like, oh, is there reincarnation? And like, convince me there's reincarnation. I don't have to convince you there's reincarnation. It's just God and the ant reincarnating over and over again. They're all connected. It doesn't matter where in this paper mache thing you are. You may be over here somewhere, and she may be this part of the journey. But every single one of our journeys coalesces. They're all sort of seamless. And that's why, the reincarnation part of things is sort of inevitable. The energy must continue, must go somewhere. The oneness is simply exploring itself in many varieties, and we're going to get into that in a moment. But I just wanted to start with that. Do we have any questions about the law of one as it stands right now? Everybody feeling that okay? Yeah? All right, cool. So the next law, which is interesting, if you look up universal law, it's funny. I kind of have to laugh sometimes when I look up stuff like this online, because I'm just like, who put this together? Where did they get this from? Like, what is that? What's the law of compatibility? Like, never heard of that one. Not to say that I haven't studied some fringe things here or there, but there'll be all sorts of stuff that'll show up in some of these laws. What I've tried to do here is put 12 laws into an order that is pretty compatible with so many of the other laws of the universe. It's sort of in the right order for numbers and colors and just every single little vibrational thing that you might have. So obviously it's easy to start with one, and that was an easy answer. And the beginning of this, it was easy for me to find my way. And there are some other ways you might think to do this, but this is what I have come to as being the most intuitive. So the second law, which comes from Hermeticism and isn't usually included in a traditional 12 universal laws, but the law of one isn't included in the 7 Hermetic principles. However, with so many of these laws, there's arguments that one could be thought of as another because they are similar, and you'll see. So with this one, we're going to go with a open eye. Okay? So, Hermetic law, the main principle is all is mind. Every single thing in this room is mind. Does anybody know what the answer to the question of what came first, the chicken or the egg is? It's tricky because they don't give you the right answer. What came first, the chicken or the egg, or the idea for the chicken and the egg? The idea comes first. So even though we're living in a physical world, there's no physical anything without an idea. You know, the rocks don't show up, fire doesn't show up until there's some sort of idea for that. Now, when you hear certain people talk about this as like an idea needs to take shape first or whatever, sometimes it sounds a little bit like it's like all knowing, all encompassing. To a certain degree, some of the first bits of activity of God were just sort of instinctual. It was like, well, that's what you do. I was asleep and now I'm awake and I'm moving. You know, this is just, well, what else is there besides, okay, I've awakened and I'm exploring, which is just where we're starting to get here. This is, you know, I'm going to take a moment to explain something about time. And, you know, there's so many deep concepts within this, which is why I'm doing 12 of these, because within each thing, there's a lot of things that we can get into. But time, you could say that the oneness is space. I'm sorry, you could say that the oneness is time, and that the mind is the space where that mind gets to roam. And the thing about time, when it initially is formed, is that it's sort of just like a stack. You know, activity, just, you know, like I'm right now in this moment, I'm going, snap, stop right there, buddy. You were just one thing and you weren't doing anything, and now you're awake. Snap, like just the eyes are opening. That activity of opening the eyes hasn't even finished. The beginning of an activity, and I'm saying stop. Because we're going to get into the stuff that comes next. Now, the mind in the future can be said to be everything. You know, your body could be thought of a lot of things. We're going to get into this in different ways in a moment, but it's made of sound, ultimately. It's made of vibrating atoms. It's a lot of empty space. It's a lot of water. You know, ultimately, at the end of the day, when it all breaks down, these are all just concepts that are coming out of the primordial ooze, and they're all ideas. You know, I had an experience on plant medicine once where I was meditating and I was looking around the room, and I was recognizing that the ceiling fan that I was looking at was made of things that I ultimately understood. I could see the screws, and I could see the fan tiles, and I could see the pipe, and all these things. And when I looked at it, I could see it. And like I could see it because I understood it. And that if I didn't understand what I was looking at, I actually wouldn't really be able to see it. And then when I had that realization, I started to not be able to see it. The things in my room started to disappear and become formless. And I realized in that moment that I was creating my entire reality by myself. And there was a very interesting thing that clued me into this, because I didn't think about my children in this moment, because that wasn't the right message from the higher self. I thought about my friend Aaron, and I thought about all my hopes and dreams for him as an academic, like as a creative person, that I wanted to see him go very far. And it took me a while to recognize why they showed me that, because I created my aspirations for him, not him. They didn't live in him, they lived in me. They lived in my experience, and my aspiration, it makes me want to cry, because when I think about it, my aspirations for him would die with me. It's a very sad thing to think that all the happy thoughts we have about the world might go away if you weren't here. So that's why I love this stuff and talk about it. So the mind is creating everything. Do we basically understand law number 2? Yeah? And any questions online, Michael? And thank you, Michael Zinn, who's helping us with the production today.
No, but Mandy is outside. I'm going to go let her in.
Cool. All right, so we're going to get into law number 3. And I guess I'm going to do this a little bit like this. Okay, I'll put this right here. So All 12 of these laws can be put together in threes. And to a certain degree, this 1, 2, 3, you're going to see repeated as I just go through them all. 1, 2, 3, and then the 1, 2, 3 repeats. Every time, like, some new thing happens, there's an additional thing created by the addition. You have one, and it becomes aware. This creates a polarity. So even though there's still technically really only one thing, it has two parts, right? So there's a lot of different ways that we can look at the polarity. What's the thing that I like? What's it called? Oh, the Vivica Pisces, which if I could do a good job here, it's what you see when you have cell division. And this is also what creates the mathematics, the geometry for a triangle. So you got a three-sided thing here. So even though only two things have been created, essentially, the thing that always was and the new thing, it's actually three now, because this has created a polarity. And this creates the concept of polarity. Now, there's a lot of ways to think about polarity, but essentially, you're just thinking about, you've got a middle, and you've got extremes. These are the extremes. You know, one's dark, one's light. One's hot, one's cold. It's just two different extremes. Polarity is a very simple concept, and when we're talking about polarity here at this level, there's no distance, there's no anything. You know, you're dealing with the nothing, which is up against the something. And now, I'm actually gonna go here too. So like, if you can see, like, there's no space, there's nothing else. It's just sort of nothing. There's no size, there's no anything. It's just a thought, this nothing, this thing that is nothing. And then there's a thought, and it's little, it's itty bitty. There's no space or anything yet. It's just beginning. So beyond this, immediately we have a polarization. And, you know, you might want to call this positive. Even though it's inert, it doesn't want to change anything. Everything's good. That's what you could call the nothing. Oblivion likes it the way it is. However, the mind is like, I don't know. Let's try some stuff. Theoretically, the negative mind, you know, that wants to, well, let's try it like this. So this creates polarity. 1, 2. Within these things, we create something that's kind of interesting, which the tree of life goes a little something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is Kabbalah now. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So this is the basic building blocks of life. People have seen the flower of life. The flower of life will be a bunch of these, just around each other. This is the petal. And the petal can be used as a marker for our chakras, our chakra systems. And within this, when this was created, a corresponding one was made on the other side. So all of a sudden we've got 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So within that instance of creation, there's a whole bunch of things that are sort of additionally created, which are extra little caveats on the laws. So once you have another leaf, a reflective leaf, you could call polarity duality. Duality maybe a little bit more for the mind. See, some of these things are a little interchangeable. Duality can go that way. Another way to look at polarity, and I should get my little notebook here so I have some of my extra bits that I put in here. But opposites. This is the original opposites. The nothing and the something. Additionally, polarity on the other side, you could call it perspective. Now that there's two leaves facing each other, there's perspective. But right here, when it's just three things, we just have polarity created. Okay? Any questions about polarity? Yes.
When you're speaking about the reflection, it's not a little bit more reflection of what? Exactly.
Well, this is some of the beginning rudimentary shapes of the universe. This is the stuff that formed everything. If I made like a crazy frilly pattern with a bunch of circles, I could create all of the female lines that there are and all of the male angles that there are through all the different points of intersection that are there in this flower of life. So the flower of life is really important. But this little section that I'm showing you right here is just what you would call a leaf from that flower, and then another corresponding leaf. And then you'd have another leaf going off either in this direction. I think they might be, probably would be created at the same time. Because more reflection, from 2 to 4, etc. And then you end up with kind of this odd little reflection going off as the whole thing replicates. But you can see some of these patterns in life. Do you kind of understand?
I'm not sure I'm looking at it from a totally different level, but you're not referring to any sort of like string theory of metaphysics.
Yeah, not exactly string theory, but I mean a lot of quantum, like this is all, quantum physics proves this. String theory, some of the things in string theory make some sense to me.
Is that really like what you're...
Well, this is just the nature of the universe. Like, you can see this in if you study plants and you watch the growth of things, you can see the way that cells actually like do form in similar ways to what the Kabbalah teaches. Like the Kabbalah shows us something that kind of looks like this is my best interpretation of it. So this is like based on our chakra system, and this is like the tree of life for them, and this is the planet, because the planet's just a reflection of us. So this is this whole system. And it stops at 10, and I'll tell you why when we get to rhythm. Because sort of after 10, it doesn't really apply to a vessel anymore. But essentially, polarity is two things, two completely opposing things, nothing and something. But I do want to say an additional thing about the nothing and something. When the nothing and something, like the part of the something, is essentially touching on this nothing, but just barely. So we got like activity here, but the little bit of this, the tiny little bit of this sliver of us that is asleep, is at slumber, and it's just a little bit, is gradiated through sort of the rest of the energetic representation of reality and creates two very distinct pieces, which I will get to what we call those in just a second. All right, so moving on from polarity. We got our fourth law here, which is vibration. Okay, and we will just do vibration as, well, I guess we'll do vibration as a triangle with a plus sign in it. Okay, so we got a positive vibration going because there's an awareness, right? But now, on the other side of this, we have 5, relativity. We have the other vibration, negative, right? Vibration's created as soon as we have this thing. The one thing is vibrating. We don't need any other things besides the one consciousness starts some activity, okay? But this creates what I was about to get into before. I'm going to teach these just all at once because it's a little bit easier just to see that, which is the law of gender. And this is gender right here. It's not about what kind of parts you have. It's just about the fact that the universe is polarized. And there are only these two energies to go around. These are them. And they are in everybody in a mixed way. I always love to say, it took me a little while to know, I am very masculine on the outside. I carry myself very masculine, but I'm very feminine on the inside. I'm just a big girl. I get along great with girls, and I'm very sensitive. You know, that's just me. I've always been a little tough guy. I like to play football and, you know, whatever, make rock music, but I'm very sensitive on the inside. And everybody has some sort of combination of those things. And, you know, if you want to talk about the relationships with, you know, gays or transsexuals, any of the LGBT community or whatever, it's all, everybody's energy is just wherever it is. And, you know, the problems, you know, inherent in some of that is that some people can't reconcile where their feelings and their energy is and what that's going to mean to them in the outside world. And so it's a difficult thing because everybody can have female energy and masculine energy at the same time in different places and not really know what to make of it or who they want to be. And it's perfectly fine for them to be whoever the hell they want to be. And that's the thing that we really got to spread around, just like, you know, peace, you know, whatever you feel, let it out. So you've got gender, and gender, it can be really coolly set because, like, here we are with my number 6, and that's just me going, I think gender's number 6. But look what I realized: 2 triangles together, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Gender, 2 triangles together. I figured that out. I felt very cool, like I was doing a puzzle as I did so many of these things, because every other thing was corresponding with all the other things. We're going to get into the law of correspondence, but it was just like one thing after another. I was like, oh, look, that's the one. I'm going to use that for this and this for this. It's a lot of fun. I have too much fun doing this. So, from this, once again, we still haven't done anything. We've got one thing. It's part of nothing and part of awareness. But this just movement to waking up, opening its eyes, just as a metaphor, has created a vibration, a positive vibration, away from the stagnant vibration, which is our negative vibration, our polarized negative and positive. So, together though, what do we have here? Gender. We have balance. And that's actually like the holy thing that people are trying to get from relationships: balance. Balance of their energy centers. And because people are actually polarized with both genders within themselves, finding that is more difficult than you would think, because you're out there, you know, I'm always searching for really tough chicks, you know, who are still feminine. Because I'm really masculine, but I like to be feminine. So my opposite pole is something like that, you know, like a Katie here. So let's see, what else do I want to add before we move on and I ask for some questions about this guy? So now, on the opposite flip of this, you know, our little first thing created, and then when this thing gets created, and there's something to sort of have a mirror image of, vibration can also be known as resonance. Because now there's something to resonate against, you know? There's another thing there. Relativity could better be known as, see, and I'm like, accidentally, today, I gotta follow my notes better. I'm sorry that I wrote perspective here. Can we pretend I didn't do that? Because I have another word for this, which was opposite, and I got all jumbled up. And I put too many down. See, I got overexcited. Let's put this with this, which is what I finally decided, and that with that, which makes the most sense. And this is here, perspective. Because for a second I was gonna make it relative perspective, but then I realized that as the first thing was forming, it didn't necessarily have a perspective because it was still one thing forming. So you needed to have like an additional thing forming in order for there to be a perspective on the thing that was forming, or a resonance to the vibration. A lot of people list the law of resonance online. You can find that. It's essentially just a variation of the law of vibration. And some people have listed the law of perspective online. It's a variation of the law of relativity. And you know, duality, I'm still not really at opposition with the nothing. So, you know, it's sort of a strange word, but duality kind of best goes in with the mind, because the mind wants to change things. So that's the dualistic nature. Things are set the way they are, and the mind wants to change. So you can kind of follow that. All right, so as our 1, 2, 3, we've got 1, everything is 1, everything is mind. This creates polarity. This original thing creates the original vibration. It's negative and positive, which creates original relativity, eventually perspective. These two things together are a nice harmonic balance. Do I have any questions about vibration, relativity, or gender? Yeah? Awesome. Okay, so now we're getting into the last line of 3 for our sort of the important to sort of the human body. Most of these guys are stuff that also then follow us in like our auric field. There's a lot of correspondence. And we have 7. And how am I doing for you guys? This is like relatively difficult things to get by, and it's subtle. So I know sometimes I can say a lot, but am I getting to it eventually? Yeah? All right. Just want to make sure eventually I've said it enough ways that it's clear. All right, so we'll go 7, 8, and 9. Okay. Now, we can think of that sort of inert thing that is nothing that we're coming from as a sort of infinite raw potential, a eternity. And we're going to call this law here the perpetual transmutation of energy. This one can eventually go on to be thought of as love. I mean, it's like, it's so easy to kind of be like, oh, this one could be love and that one could be hate and this one, because it's all dualistic and it really depends on your perspective. So feel free to recognize that these are interchangeable. Ultimately, everything just has a couple pieces working together. We have a question?
Yeah, the stream is a little bit behind, but I have Neil August.
Okay.
He's asking, all of this is one-dimensional before moving outward from the void. I guess he's asking about dimensionality.
Yes. So at this stage of the game, in what I'm really showing you guys here, and the original creation of the universe, before we get into anything physical, you've got nothing. We'll just make it dotted lines, right? Nothing becomes something, and something is light on some level, but we're not actually at light. We're on just the idea of ideas. And when there's ideas, there doesn't have to be any form. Idea, there's no dimension, there's no time. You know, essentially, this guy that is being developed like this in these 12 stages that I'm going to show you, or this girl, it doesn't matter. Hey, Michael, can you make sure that door's locked? So this being is going to, is the front door locked? Oh, okay. So this being is going to go from the smallest, to absolute, total infinity. This mind, the mind, before anything is created, before any physical anything shows up anywhere on the planet, the mind knows everything. Every single thing. In reality, everything that's going on could be seen to be happening simultaneously in the past and in the future, all at once, where it's sort of reshaping itself with each pass of its wave of dimensionless. It's a very strange sort of world we live in. And this is why people don't bother to get into these kind of subjects, because what it reveals is that things are very amorphous. And what we're doing is we're just like holding everything tightly together. But we came from this field of just infinite mind. And then once that infinite mind was, I know everything. Now, let's celebrate. Party time! It's what we can call the party of the gods. We are going to make stuff and experience it. And experience ourselves. Experience ourselves. But we haven't even gotten to that point where the thing's thought of everything. This is just the thing still naturally developing. Waking up, accidentally creating vibration, accidentally creating relativity, accidentally creating gender, and accidentally starting this process, which you're going to see in a moment. That covers our boys' question. Okay, so we got our perpetual transmutation of energy, and then we'll go with, I did a terrible, but inspired action. So now these ones I'm just going to talk to you about them just like this for a second, because this is the one that likes to get attached on the back of the law of attraction all the time, and it's very important that it does. What's happening here is inspired action. It's not just action. The universe isn't going, the universe is stacking on top of each other in a very, very particular way. It's not chaotic, it's inspired, it's divine. And there's a wonderful joke that I love to tell, and if you haven't heard it, it goes a little something like this. There's a big flood coming, and a man decides he's going to go onto his roof to save himself, and as the water starts rising, he starts to pray to God. And he says, God, please come save me. And a boat shows up, a little rowboat, and the guy's like, hey, get in my boat. He's like, no, God's gonna come save me. So now the water keeps rising, and now it's like up to his waist, and he's like, God, save me, save me. Boat comes, they throw him a lifesaver, it's a military boat. He's like, no, God's gonna save me. Throws it back to them, they leave. Now a helicopter comes a little while later, and he's up to his neck, and he's like, no, God's gonna save me. So, man drowns, goes up to heaven, and he goes, what the hell? You made me look like such a jerk. I told everybody you were going to save me. He's like, I sent you 2 boats and a helicopter, and you didn't take any of them. When opportunity arises, that is when you must act. You know, when you go to play the game at the fair and there's a conveyor belt with the little goose, the little duck, and you got to shoot it with the BB gun. You got to wait until it's lined up. If you shoot too early, you miss. If you shoot too late, you miss. It's the inspired action. The timing is everything. I learned this the hard way in my life. Run everywhere, doing like muscling everything, doing way more than I had to do. Not about action, it's about inspired action. You know, Bruce Lee knew to wait until the proper moment when you were in the proper place and your balance was just properly off. And then he moved, or he hit you, or whatever it was. But it's about timing. So, perpetual transmutation of energy. There is infinite energy, and it's going to keep on changing. And the thing that ultimately makes these changes are the inspired action. And it's funny, when the people don't get on the inspired action the inspired action train, energy stagnates, and it doesn't really go anywhere. And a lot of people's health and dysfunction in their body is the stagnation of energy in their body, things that they can't quite get over, an injury they haven't looked at, or whatever it might be. And that energy is stuck there. So it's through this inspired action we're able to finally move forward. And sometimes that inspired action is you going, hey, this is an opportunity, I'm going to capitalize on it. And sometimes the inspired action is the universe going, car accident, or something like that, to get your attention, to get your energy shifted, to make a big shift so that you fall into the pattern that they want you to be in. So, perpetual transmutation of energy, inspired action, together, we like to call them cause and effect. Now, I just love the way you can see how the yin-yang is kind of swimming in itself. Swimming. And this one thing is causing this other thing to move, to change. The perpetual transmutation of energy with the inspired action creates a cause and effect. And now, of course, this cause and effect can be seen all over here, from the 1 to the 2. I mean, just the number system alone. You know, the fact that all of a sudden a 6-sided star can go here and is, you know, once we have 6 things, 6 points, you know, this 2 triangles, you know, like all these weird little correspondences, it's all coming out of just very, very, very simple cause and effect. This polarity is the first vibration. You know, this vibration is only partly vibrating. The other part of it is still on some level. On some level, it's still. And on some level, it's vibrating. That's the relativity. Those things together balance gender. So, does anybody have any questions about 7, 8, and 9? And what time is it, by the way?
We were at 8:15.
8:15, okay. No? Awesome. Okay, so, does anybody do tarot cards? Or, I guess tarot cards is the best. Are you familiar with tarot a little bit? So, when I broke out the tarot cards, after I was having all these numbers with, you know, the 12 laws and all this stuff, I'm trying to get correspondence and figure out what's going on. Because the numbers only go up to 10, and I couldn't exactly figure that out. But I had some help once I saw that the numbers of the Kabbalah similarly went to 10 when it would, I don't want to get this wrong, it's something like this, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So these 10 happen like this because essentially where we're going to go to now is like a replication level. Because the next one, number 10, is rhythm. And what you can kind of take from that is the rhythm completes, the rhythm begins again. If you look at it in terms of like over here, all these, what, the 9 laws we have, we can make 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 4 point, 5 point, 6 point, 7 point, 8 point, 9 point. And now, for the first time, we have essentially enough lines to make this beautiful thing, with this 9 being our final thing, the cause and effect that kind of ties everything together. And now we're getting outside of the completion of this thing. So when we get into 10, and in numerals say this, 10 is essentially 1 again, even though we do have 3 laws that do continue, which is why we see 12 so much in so many different things. But this is also why you see that there are a lot of numbers and a lot of number systems. You know, the Hermetic Principles, want to talk to you about 7. The universal laws usually are broken down as 12. The tarot cards and the Tree of Life are usually talking about 10 points, 9 to 10 points. So they're all right. They're all right, they all correspond with one another, and I'm going to do my best to show you how they do. So we're going to get to a nice little simple thing right here, and I'm going to make this one smaller. We're just going to go with 10 and 11 right here. So 10 is going to be rhythm, which we will call, and then 11 is correspondence. 2 of these guys together. And then finally, we have infinite infinite compensation. Infinite compensation. Usually I really want you guys to understand what they mean when they're saying compensation is available. Rhythm. Start again, create more. Correspondence. Okay. Now. Okay, so you could essentially say that, you know, from all of this activity, the original rhythm takes shape once, you know, energy meets action, which was really when the mind opened its eye. That was when the action began, you know, that was like the initial action. But now, as we begin here, the rhythms, like you will see in life, I'm sure, correspond with what shell might. Something like this. Maybe I can draw it actually to give you guys an idea. This is kind of a trippy thing to do. All right. So if we have this square that I'm going to draw. Okay. So essentially, if we split it in half that nothing that we were talking about, right? And then when we get into here, this other half that is aware and thinking, it's polarized itself because a piece of it is the nothing. So it's split in half. Remember, it's gendered. So then when we get over to the gendered, whatever on these other levels, what we find is we keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. And it creates what you would call correspondence, which is what you see in like the Fibonacci sequence, which is what's like in a shell, where like the shell is just making larger and larger and larger things. So when that shell comes all the way around again to another octave, another layer of the same thing that it was on just a moment, earlier, we started here, we went all the way around, and now we're here again. That is compensation. I'm not sorry about compensation. Damn, too many words is too simple. That is correspondence. Corresponding. Oh, I am in an almost identical position, but not quite. I'm in a different octave. And you can see that actually when it comes to music teaches correspondence really good. If you look at the keys on a keyboard, you've got your two blacks here. You've got your three blacks here. So your first chord, your first note and your last note are correspondences to each other. They are the beginning of the shell at the one time, and then it spins down, and then the exact full correspondence of an octave, you could call that an octave lower or higher. So correspondence could be thought of as an octave lower or higher. And I kind of have to think about that. This is how hard this is. Every single time I say something like that, an octave lower or higher, I have to go, define lower, define higher. What do those words truly mean? Is that diminishing what this means in some way? Because it is just, it's so absolute and pure, the tiny little things that we're saying here, because what you see in that shell is what's going on in your life in every way, shape, and form. Relationships with people, reincarnation, everything. It's all this stuff over and over again, which is why we're going to be able to talk about it at length after I've just explained the basic concepts. We'll still be able to talk about it a lot. So this is this big thing, this octave here. And now infinite compensation comes from the original fact that, one, what did I say? Everything's mind. Every physical thing here is mind. And he's got all the mind in the world. He's gonna keep thinking and thinking, thinking. She, he, I don't know, I don't want to offend anybody. To me, it doesn't matter. So it's just what I keep saying. As a little boy, that's what was in my brain about God. But it doesn't have a sex. There's no shape. I keep trying to actually figure out what would you call the nothing and the something, and what is the mother and what is the father, and it's really debatable. It really kind of, this thing of gender. It's like, which one's the boy and which one's the girl? It's just the weird way we've polarized that there's one and another. So there's an interesting little thing about that. So from this mind that is infinite, before there's anything, there's infinite compensation of mind. The mind thinks of every single thing it can possibly think. And I'm sure on whatever level of a mind, it does whatever a mind does without deciding to make any sort of way in order for itself to experience itself. So this is just its infinite compensation due to the nature that all is mind. Before I go on to law number 13, how do we feel about rhythm, correspondence, and infinite compensation? Cool? All right. So finally, and it's very interesting, this got me down a big rabbit hole, and I just like this shape, and I like drawing. But the law of attraction. The law of attraction is not like any of these other laws here at all. Because the law of attraction is the only law here that's got ego kind of built right into it. It's the law of attraction. Well, why do we want that over the other? Why do maybe we want to push them away? You know, the reality we live in is dualistic. And, you know, we see that that's good and that's bad, and we want that and we don't want that. So it's very strange the way the law of attraction has been laid out in the first place, because it's kind of superficial. It makes it very superficial. Really, the law of attraction is fundamentally the law of creation. Because you are one, you are the ant and the full creator. That's why I use that shape there. You are the full creator. You are the one who made it. So, attracting anything, everything is already in existence, essentially, within your mind and body. I want to teach you something about size and scope. And this used to really freak me out when I was a little kid. It's not to be freaked out about. But if you take a length of any amount and you cut it in half into 2 equal pieces, and then you do it again, and 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 you do it again, you can just keep doing it again. Forever. 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 Because how do you end up with the odd? You just always cut, and you can get smaller and smaller and smaller. Infinite big, infinite small. All that really matters is the frequency that you're in. You know, there are many sounds higher than what we can hear. There are many colors and and frequencies of sight that are lower or higher than our vision can take in. Frequencies of light, essentially, they're just too dim for us or too bright for us, or whatever it might be. We are in a certain frequency band. So this infinite small and infinite big, again, essentially goes to the infinite compensation. Things, sort of every individual thing is infinite. And there's a very strange concept that sort of comes into play with things never really being able to come close to one another, because somewhere between you and I is this infinite field where I can't cut the distance. I keep trying to get close to you, but I can't. I either obliterate you out of the way, or we bounce off each other because of this field. And this field is, I think, what they've talked about when they talk about the 0-point field, this infinite energy that's all around us, because there's this infinity every time you go to touch somebody at this distance that just cannot shrink enough to allow for the actual things to come together, which is the same thing ultimately that's keeping all your cells in place and keeping everything in your body from falling over. These things are holding us up. These just quiet little laws of the universe. And these are the things that are stopping you from walking through a wall. Even though your body's a lot of empty space, you should be able to do that on some level. It seems reasonable. So, when you have this infinite size and scope and frequency, I'll move on from that to get back to it. But when we get to attraction, and we're essentially attracting from within ourselves as much as without ourselves. Because there's infinite small and infinite big, which means everything looks around every corner. I'm like, oh, this is not what I want to attract. And in order to fix that, I had to kind of just get them like ducks in a row before we would leave and chill myself out before I would go. And I was able to fix that problem thanks to some things that Esther said. But before I get into some of the specific bits about attracting anything that you might want to attract and how that ultimately works, I want to talk about this shaman who, there was this guy who was a spiritual teacher on YouTube, and I just love telling this story because it was such a great story. He went out to a field to, as he said, pray for rain with this shaman. And they went out to the field, and the shaman stood there for a minute with his eyes shut and his head up, and after 60 seconds, he turns to the guy and he goes, "I'm hungry, let's eat." And the guy's like, I came to learn, I'm a spiritual, I thought we were going to do something, I was going to learn something spiritual here. And he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I thought we were going to pray for rain. He said, no, you pray for rain, you get more no rain. So I got back in the car and he said, so what did you do? He said, I felt the moisture under my feet from the rain. I smelt the dew in the air. I saw that the crops had bloomed beautifully. I saw my family and my friends happy and fed. And we were dancing. And then I realized I was hungry. And that is how you attract. You attract by celebrating the bounty before it has arrived. I always thought it was sort of foolish. I always had a lot of respect for Native American culture since I was little, but on whatever level, especially because Catholics, I had a lot of I was very anti-religion when I was younger. And the praying thing I thought was silly as an atheist, and these Native Americans, they're dancing around, and I'm like, you think you're going to add a dance to the prayer, and that's going to fool whoever you think is up there? They weren't adding a dance. They were joyfully dancing in celebration of the bounty that they knew was coming. It was already there. They already had it. I got it. It's mine. Thank you. Thank you. Genuinely thank you from the bottom of my heart, like it's in my hands. Here it is. Oh man, it's so beautiful. I love it. Oh, thank you. If you could sit and meditate every day and pretend that this marker is whatever you want, you would attract it shortly. Like seriously, just sit there and project, I love it, until you can't love it anymore. Not blocking yourself from it, not sad that you don't have it, genuinely hopping up and down on the inside of how joyful you are. Because that is just creating energy, powerful energy, and powerful polarization with what you want. And attraction is creation. It is thinking about the thing you want, because you are the creator. That's all you have to do. But you have to know that. You have to know that you can just think about the things that you want. And ultimately, you can find them if you can polarize with those things. Now, there's plenty of things that can get in the way of that can get in the way of your energy. And I am somebody who has done that big time for myself. I'm such an overachiever. I'm always staring at, the victory that I've got in mind. And the universe doesn't always have the same plan as you do. So, when you're attracted, it's important to know what your specific expectations are. You have to recognize, and this is something that we're going to talk about at length in the next class when we do the Law of One and the raw material, about sort of how people incarnate and what the process is. But essentially, you are your judge. Some people get really viscerally upset about God's going to judge me, someone's going to judge me, Satan's going to judge me. No, it's you. You're going to judge yourself. You're going to be given the ultimate perspective, the perspective of this table and that microphone and every chair in the room and every person in the room. And I'm going to go, Jesse, were you a good teacher tonight? And I'm going to go, I don't know, I could have done better at this. Maybe I'm rambling here. I'm being a little dyslexic. And I will look at myself and I will take a measure. And I go, all right, next time I'm going to do it like this. So much of the things that are going on in your existence were pre-chosen for you, by you, for your best good, for the greater good of everything. You have been put in accordance with yourself and where you're supposed to be. And this is a little bit of a side thing, but it's just something nice to tell people, because of the nature of everybody being one, but everybody being unique. Because we're all different little polarizations of God. And you could say it like this, like the horoscope is that one soul being spread into a million different, you're coming from this polarization, and over here there's a plus sign, over here there's a negative sign, we can take it over here. This is why we got the 4 directions and all this stuff. This is just the different places in this energy you could be coming from. And we're all unique. Unique. And it's very important, actually, that we put our arms out, that we put the teeth of the cog that we are out. We have a tendency, myself included, when I was younger and getting older, I pulled all my arms in because I noticed when I would affect people in a negative way, and I didn't like it because I'm very empathetic and I just didn't want to have that effect. before you know it, I wasn't me anymore. I wasn't loud and obnoxious and funny and smiling and happy. I was like watching myself and like, I don't want to step on people's toes and like, that's it. And I'm supposed to be that guy, you know? If I offend you, then sorry. I did it really innocently. I'm a good guy. You know, I don't mean to offend people, but sometimes my energy's too big. But those people are supposed to learn from their reaction to my energy being too big. And I was supposed to learn from how they reacted. And eventually learn to be my unique self and let my freak flag fly and be who I am. And everybody really has to do that, because it's when we do that that we heal our families and we heal our friends groups and we heal the world. We're all sort of not quite being true to ourselves, and we're letting the place keep going the way it's going. And if we just all went, you know what? Things would change. Strangeness! All right. Do I have any questions about attraction? And what's my time, Mr. Michelson?
You are 8:39.
8:39. Cool. Okay. So, do we have any questions about any of that from there? Yes.
Something else. Is there such thing as divine timing?
Divine timing? Divine timing, comes straight under inspired action. Inspired action, divine timing, they're essentially the same thing. Synchronicities are a little bit of a different thing. This is an interesting spiritual concept that I can show you guys. What was the best way to do it? So, I don't have I want to write, but I want to write this children's story where we have this reincarnated princess and prince, and they're going to be the homecoming king and queen. They're supposed to be. That's what it's supposed to be. And they're going to be together forever because their families need to unite their energy. And this happened in the past. And in the past, they had all these fairy companions, all these mysterious little energy beings who were helping them and guiding them. But the bad forces, poisoned what was going on, and ultimately they never married and they died, and the kingdoms didn't come together. And now this is a second chance for them to do so. But things have changed on Earth, and there is this veil that's up. And now the fairies and the dwarves and these creatures that were helping to guide the bad ones and helping the good guys are separated by this veil, and they can't hear anything they say. They don't know when they're next to them or anything. And these fairies are trying to figure out how to get their attention. How do we get their attention? How do we let them know we're here? How do we tell them how important this is? Oh my goodness. Speaking about this makes me want to cry, because I'm very sensitive to spirits and I like what I'm saying, because this is the thing, this is the sorrow of the spirit world. They don't know how to get through to us. They're trying. Synchronicity is how they have kind of most easily got through to us. You'll see lots of people who love to talk about 1111. 1111's never been a number for me. I wrote a song called 149, and then 149 became a number for me. My football number and my mom's birthday is the 16th. 16 became a number for me. It just sort of is, if they can get through to you on a line of synchronistic action, they will. And if that's more what you're speaking about, but more on the line of making things happen, the attraction all comes from that inspired action. You think and because essentially when I sit here and I'm thinking about this pen and I want it to be $1 million or whatever it is, right? Essentially, I am going, God save me, I'm going to drown. God save me, I'm going to drown. And he's going to send me, 2 boats and a helicopter. So I always feel nervous I might not get that third chance, so I like to try to be aware of that second chance when it comes around. I'm like, this has happened before. Jump on as quickly as possible, because sometimes you don't notice. And but I do believe that because of the rhythms and the nature of the universe, you do tend to get more than one chance at some of these things. Especially when you miss it and you recognize it, you'll recognize it when it comes back. Because of that lovely correspondence. You're like, oh, it's been a couple of years, but I know what this is. This is that opportunity I said no to yesterday. Woohoo! And then that's it.'re off to the races. Attractive.
I don't get rich overnight, so I'm just trying to why it takes a while for example.
Well, this is a very interesting question, because on some levels, you're like, that's impossible, or how could that be? But you really have to bend your mind And I'll have some examples because I don't know if any of them will come to me right now. But while I was on this journey over the past like 5 or 6 years, I had a couple things happen to me that were very like, wow, I didn't think that was even possible, sort of things. And this is what happens, like when we look around and we use our judgment and we're like, doesn't seem like fertile ground for growth. Well, then it isn't. And you don't know. I don't know. We're not that smart. Because there is this, polarized, third view of these two things, that's kind of giving some, angle to this outside thing. Again, this is why you sometimes look at this as polarity, perspective, because so many of these things, they coalesce, but it's through that outer, lens of judgment that we can crystallize what we're talking about. And because of that, there's a couple things. Do you want to get your hopes up? No, it's not about hopes. It's about knowing. You don't know the timing. You don't know when. You don't know how. But it's happening because you know that you are capable of taking inspired action. You got plenty of energy. So whatever, bring it on. I told the universe what I want. Opportunity's going to come along. I'm going to take that inspired action. Game over. It will be. You're coming from that place. It's done. And when you're coming from that place too, like, I forgot, like, what happened? There was something crazy that happened. So I was doing a voiceover job, which is, it's like a non-union thing. I'm the narrator for a show called Food Paradise. And it's really not the greatest paying job. It's kind of like, because I don't get paid every time it airs or anything. I just get paid to do my initial sessions. Compared to like a regular job, it's a wonderful job. And I certainly always appreciated it. But it was not necessarily going to like feed my family kind of job. And I was asking the universe for that, sort of. And then all of a sudden it shifted. I got call Food Paradise. We just got a 65 episode order season. We'd previously been 13 episode seasons. So from 13 to 65. I did not think that was remotely possible. And the show had been canceled. I'd almost been replaced as the host the previous season. So like, my thoughts about this show and how much money it was going to make me, it was nothing. And then 65 episodes, like, that's, oh my goodness, that feeds my family for the year. Holy crap, I couldn't believe it. I had a similar moment, and this thing didn't end up coming through, but where all of a sudden I had a license for a comic book that I was doing and a music thing that I was doing that was $100,000. It was just like, you're gonna what? My what? I didn't even finish the what. Like it was things that I didn't think were possible. So what we think is impossible is sometimes possible. It's sometimes way more possible than we would ever think. And I really started trying to train my brain to just be super open-minded because it doesn't hurt. It helps. So like no matter how many setbacks you have in your mind against how good it's going, doesn't help to focus on that. It does help to be like, woohoo, it's great. That does help, So I was sitting there and I remember I wrote this song because I was just sort of like trying to, I'll share it with you guys. It went, what is it? Plane set out one day, loaded up with weight and gold, heading off to somewhere sketchy. You and I may never go. The pilot got in a spin, he was cashing in his chips. Tried to save his life half a dozen times before death took him in its raining money. And that is just a story about how it could possibly rain money. And that's just me sitting down going, I suppose it could rain money. I suppose if a pilot got into a difficult thing and he was transporting money, but you don't know. And it only helps to think positively and to think that you could run into your old friend who's got a whole bunch of money now and loves you and wants to work with you. You could run into that old flame. You could find out that you're an heir. There's a million things that can happen that I can think of. And I mean, they all sound kind of sensational until it's the one thing that it'll actually be to put it together. And when you hear it, and I've had this happen many times, you're just always kind of like, wow. It's always the thing you didn't think was possible. And then you're like, I'm done. You know, which is really the one thing. This is what you should all learn. From this, we're done. Because we're overthinking everything. Everything is this. And we're like, ah! And it's just rhythm, plus and minus, and spinning stars and stuff. We are coming from movement and joy. Do we have any other questions? And what time do we got? How much time do I have to see what I might introduce as a closing something for today? 8:49? Okay, cool. So we got like a little more than 10 minutes. And we started a little late, so we'll go, let's say 15 minutes. What do we want to get into next to continue our journey down this rabbit hole here? Okay, so looking at some of my notes, we went through the chicken or the egg. Okay, since this is a general overview, I want to explain an analogy that really takes the law of relativity into the physical world and will give us all, I think, a better idea about what that law really means and how that law is reflected out in the universe. You know, because I think something as simple as the one, you know, the nothing in the mind or vibration is easy enough to understand. But relativity is a little bit more complex. Now, there's this old joke or adage, I don't know what you want to call it, about a group of guys feeling an elephant in the dark and trying to describe it to each other, right? So you got one guy in the back by a leg, one guy got a tail in their hand, one guy's got a tusk in their hand, one guy's got the the belly in their hand. You know, they're touching it in all different places and they're describing it. And they're like, oh, it's really big and round and kind of hard. I don't know, it seems really firm. You know, so it's like, yeah, it's kind of firm, but it feels more like a tree trunk, and it's got like shells on the bottom, and it's like flat on the bottom, and oh no, man, you got it all wrong. It's skinny and smooth, and it's pointy at the end, and they're describing the tusk, and they're like, no, it's skinny, but it's kind of soft and it's fuzzy at the end. It's the tail. Everybody is seeing a different part of the picture. One of the things that relativity has done to us, which is really awful, has made us really easy to divide as countries, as religions, and then even just ourselves within our families and everything else. The language that we use, there's so many ways for us to get divided through this relativity of I'm seeing this thing from that angle, you're seeing this thing from another angle. You know, there's a really good example for me. I used to get really upset when somebody would say to me, why are you wearing that? And I would take it as an immediate affront that like they were like judging it as bad. In reality, why you're wearing that is relatively neutral. And I'm sure most of the people who said this to me did not expect me to sort of roar back at them because I like it, you know, or whatever it was that I did, trying to like stand up for myself, feeling prosecuted. But I wasn't being prosecuted. They came upon something that was relative to them and they questioned it. My polarization to their question was, you know, the reaction that I gave, but it really isn't, it's not really that going on. Most of the time, we're having this relative experience where, you know, our moms are the best examples of this. How many times have you been hanging out with your mom or somebody's mom, and they start saying stuff that is so insulting to the daughters? Daughters especially. Daughters get it the worst. You know, it's just like all this like weird backbiting, quiet, and you're like, oh my God, what is this? But you're looking at the mom and you see there's nothing behind the eyes. They have no idea that they've done anything wrong. They have no idea that they've said anything wrong, they've misspoken. They're speaking from their own created universe and their own set of worries that they've worried about since they were little. You know, it's all well and good that you've decided not to worry about smoking or you've decided not to worry about whatever it may be. She does, you know. She can't quite change that. And we're coming from those places where we're worrying about each other in our ways, or we're operating from the place that we're operating. And it's very easy to just blank out. And I mean, the world that we're living in right now of this relativity is very interesting, you know, because you have a, what you might call the most polarized part of the liberal sort of democratic personality of God, and then the more libertarian freedom, thought ideology, the Ron Swanson, none of it works, don't give them money. And the way they conversate with each other, though, is very disingenuous. The Republicans calling the bleeding heart liberal, that's a misappropriation of what's going on. Hey, this should have been done right in the first place, and doing it wrong is messing everything up. True, So when you misappropriate that energy, then they're like, ugh. But now there's a great misappropriation going on with certain people who are not liberal, not necessarily Trump supporters or not whatever. They're not liberal, and they've all been lumped into the same category. If you're somebody who really doesn't trust the government because you've been researching conspiracy theories for 2 decades, and I've researched them plenty, there's plenty of reasons not to. That's your right. And that person who's like, no, I have reasons to not trust this system and I can't vote for a Joe Biden. That argument is being marginalized into a racist Trump supporter. And this is where we get that, real bit of relativity going on, where people just they're not having the same conversation anymore. So there's no middle ground, and there's no progress. And we get all of that stifled energy that doesn't have anywhere to go. I want to talk about auras and the auric field and the chakra system. I'm going to be doing the meditation class this Thursday and doing some meditation things here. I don't know if anybody's ever come to Tranquility Within's meditation class. We do a guided meditation every Thursday. And Stacy, what's Stacy's last name? I don't remember. But Stacy is the person who handles it. She's one of our psychics here, and she's awesome. But I'm filling in this week. And whenever I do my meditation, I always like to open up my chakra system. There's a lot of ways to think about this. And honestly, since working with the Tree of Life a little bit more, I'm probably going to try and experiment with some different modalities and different chakra methods for myself in the future. But what I've been working with very simply for a long time, and I think it's a very nice system to go by, is the 7 chakra system, which starts from your root chakra, which is here, like your tailbone, and goes up to the top of your head. So you can follow colors with this, and if ever you're in the Tranquility Within and you're looking for stones to help somebody in whatever way, try to figure out where it is in their body that their difficulty is taking shape. And if you could do that, you can very likely help them to get some relief from it by getting them something in the color that they're missing. They need communication, blue in the throat, which I'll go over all this stuff in a second, or they need bravery, making decisions, whatever it might be. Yellow is the solar plexus. Right? So also there's like a planetary chakra, which is essentially the soul of Gaia as a piece of you. The planet itself is a correspondence. You could say, that's me, that's the planet. These shapes are in both things. Within everything is one. So you've got this little planet chakra here. And when I meditate, I like to pretend that I lower this chain from my root chakra that has an anchor on it. It's a crystal anchor. And I put it down into the planet, and I visualize these beautiful geodes. Like, have you ever seen really gigantic crystal formations, like in the caves? Like, have you ever seen, it's like a little person? The whole room is just crystals. So I envision that kind of thing, and I watch my little anchor wrap around the thing. And I open up myself to Gaia, or whatever you want to call planet Earth, because the Earth is you just as much as your body is you. So now you got your root chakra here, and we can go red for that guy. We do our Roy G. Biv up from here. Root chakra, and then we go our sacral chakra, which usually kind of represented by the belly button and like sexual system, but it's desire, interest, sort of just, creativity. It's more than, it's like a very subtle sort of like, if you see an animal go, what's that? Like it's that. It's just this quiet, interested. That's what you have coming on. That's the emotion, and that translates also to sex and intense love and stuff like that. But largely, it's ultimately the things that are pulling our fancy. Then we got our third chakra here. Oh, and that guy's orange for the sacral. And I'll write down sacral too. Orange. And now we got yellow here, and this is the solar plexus. And the solar plexus, obviously, it's the center of strength in your body. Look at my stomach muscles, I'm so strong. And yellow, in other classes, it's a much longer conversation, so I'm just not going to get into it now. But into the realms of consciousness, when you get into the different dimensions of consciousness, this is the third dimension, and this is where we're living. And it's this fear, faith dimension where we are coming out of this sort of survival place, which is more of that interest place, that sexual id thing. Going from the oneness to interest, and now to, there's other things, opposing things, finding balance for ourselves. And above this is the dimension of our heart, the fourth one, which is green, which is the dimension of love. And, your heart, somebody's having heart problems, you want to try to get them like a green stone. Ultimately, every physical problem that we're having is represented, so you could say one comes first, the other comes first. We know that mind comes first. It's represented energetically within your system. So if you have cancer, or you have a heart attack, or whatever it might be, it's going to be represented in your system. So when you're getting stoned, what you're getting is a little moon in your pocket that has a certain amount of geometric energy that's vibrating in it, vibration, and affecting you in a quiet way, and changing, pushing at your energy to give rise to change for you. So that's what you're helping them do. You're helping them change the energetic thing so that they can hopefully move past the physical thing. So now going up from green and 4, we have the throat chakra, which is blue, and a center for communication. And then up there we've got indigo. Indigo, which is our third eye in between our eye. And it's really easy for people to go, third eye, psychicness. No, just think of it as sensitivity. Sensitivity. And honestly, if you sit right here in your chairs, and if you close your eyes, and if you bring your attention to this area, and just sort of feel your sensitivity, I think every one of you will actually notice that you do have something beyond that physical and whatever sensitivity, a sensitivity to energy that most people on this planet just aren't using. And the people who are on the planet using it, plenty of them are having lots of difficulty. That's why there's so much bad psychics. It's very easy to doubt yourself as you're processing energy and information that might be coming in. But sensitivity is where your sixth sense is at. Feeling people's vibes and energy when you meet them, knowing that, oh, that's somebody that I really like, I want to be their friend. Knowing that this is the right class for me, I like Jesse, or you know what, Jesse's energy is not right for me. It's not the right class. That is just from your sensitivity. That doesn't have anything to do with, oh, well, I touched Jesse and his face feels warty. It doesn't work. Or I saw him and granted, you could work that way, but most people are usually operating from that more visceral sensitivity, which they think is a collection of all these senses, but it's way more this quiet, energetic sense that we all have. So continuing down our chakra thing, finally we've got the top of the head, which is the 7th, and we would do violet. And you know how we went over here with octaves where there's correspondence? On here, you get a kind of thing where you could call the red and the violet in correspondence with each other. What is pink? Pink's just, a bunch of white added to the red. So this is a new octave that essentially gets started the same way you would on a piano. beyond you. And this other octave is the octave to the spiritual, energetic side of our ancestors, the Akashic records, if you will. The Akashic records, if you've never heard that term, is a term to describe the totality of all of the knowledge that God has amassed by experiencing itself. And none of that is lost. It's all recorded forever and for all time. And we can access it in different ways. And so much of what is going on in the world today, of us running around thinking we got to learn this and we got to learn that, as we connect to our more higher-minded self, we can actually reclaim pieces of ourselves from other lives that have already learned things like this. And that's a lot of what I've done. You know, I'm 38. I've been doing, looking at this, hardcore, maybe 6-8 years, but I just blew my doors off when I started really exploring, taking it seriously, being a plant shaman, and taking plant medicine. I'm taking drugs. I'm taking my new course in quantum physics. That's what has been my experience. And there's a lot of ways to get through these things, and meditation has now been another venture for me as well. So when you sit down to meditate, it is a worthwhile thing to make the connection to these systems of your body. They are just energetic systems, and if you can visualize a color with them, that's helpful. And they control essentially gland systems and chemicals in our body, and the timings that they get released in. There's these Tibetan monks that would do spinning in this little yoga system, all in the name of getting our chakra system spinning evenly. Because apparently every one of the chakras is spinning, and when we're first born, they're spinning together. And then over time, old age is essentially a misalignment of our energy systems. Now this starts firing later than this, that's doing too much, and then when we're all funky, before you know it, we're dead. So, I know you have something to say. Do I have any questions? And I know we're almost done.
I know I want to wrap it up. You can probably answer this one quickly. Related to something you said earlier, it's from Jillian Mochio. She says, would you say when you get a strong negative feeling in reaction to another person's actions, that is a reflection of ourselves and something we need to improve? She says, I think you're past this, but...
Oh yes, absolutely. It's very funny. I had this a very, very interesting experience. When I partake in psilocybin, I have apparently worked with these in other lives. Apparently in many continents and many countries, I've worked with people to help heal them with psilocybin. Psilocybin's been shown to be a major depression medicine. Really helps people get over the depression. That was what it did for me in a huge way. It helped me feel gratitude. I got my thank you tattoo immediately after my very first trip. I was just so enamored. I was like, oh my God, I'm an idiot, and there's so much for me to learn, and just flipped me over. I was in this rut, and I went from being in a rut to not, and people are now microdosing psilocybin and having a really great experience with it, all sorts of stuff. But some of the stories that Native Americans talk about, and I always loved Native American culture, was communing with the air spirits and the spirits of the fire and things. So I've been trying to commune with those spirits and have some of these experiences for a very long time. And finally, after many years, I somehow attracted this cloud animal. It was an elemental. And I've read about this in books, that elementals are essentially math. And I could see the math in this squishy little cloud. It was like a cloud on the outside. I'll even try it because it will be fun. It was a little cloud on the outside, a big little cloud. And then it came to this little point with like a Q-tip head, something like that. And it was hanging out on the top of my thing, and I could see it because I could see the sacred geometry, I could see the energy, and I could form what it was. This thing was existing in another realm of reality, but I was able to form it with my eyes. And my friend was with me, he was in the same state. I go, Stefan, check it out. And he turns around And when he sees this thing, he goes, ah! Completely freaks out. I'm pretty cool. So when I saw it, I didn't freak out. I was just like, wow, that's pretty cool. But my friend was just like, holy crap, I've never seen anything like this, which was a fair reaction. It was definitely an interesting thing. I'd never seen anything like this. And it was one of the coolest things that I was ever experiencing. But as soon as he reacted like that, I saw this thing react the exact same way. Complete correspondence with his reaction. And I had never seen it more clearly of how an animal level intelligence, which obviously this thing was, I was seeing something that was an intelligence, but it was a very simple intelligence, and it responded, it corresponded, it caused and effected with Stefan's fear of it. My friend Stefan thought that it was an alien or something. He was like, I didn't know what the hell it was. It was crazy. But it showed me immediately that reaction to each other. And we all are having this reaction all the time. Every animal is having this reaction. And that it's just the, sorry, I hate my board because I can't tell what anything is, but the cause and effect of these things. It just keeps it all stirring forward. And yeah, the reactions are certainly blocking up our energy. Did you have a question before we go? And do we have any other questions at home? All right, cool. So I'm just going to talk 2 seconds just about next week. And next week we are not here because we've got a Jewish holiday. So it's going to be October 5th, I think is the next Monday after this. So, and from there we're going to be getting, today was just kind of an intro to everything. We'll be talking about everything next week when we do it, not next week, the week after. I'm going to have a printout of something similar to this with some basic stuff that I can give out to everybody that'll have just all the universal laws because they all tie into everything that we're going to talk about. But in starting with law of one as a focus, we're going to talk about the law of one as it's been put forth through channeled information through Ra, who is basically a consciousness collection that has visited the planet at various times and is handing information out. And I can tell you that the information is right because it corresponds with so much of the information that I know isn't channeled and is very additive to that stuff. So it brings a lot to sort of creation. Ra talks a lot about what we call the distortions, which are light and free will and love. And essentially he calls them distortions because they are the things that go against the inert oneness, the things that have seemingly separated us all, as light has, as free will has, as love has. So the creation of the universe, is told really well here through the creations of the dimensions and densities. It's a lot about color and dimensions and sort of the way things could be happening on a lot of different levels in time and space. A lot of quantum mechanics, as we were talking about earlier. We'll be going deeper into other things beyond that, but I know that's what we're going to be working on October 5th. I hope you guys had a great time, and if you have any questions or anything, let me know, and I hope everybody at home had a great time. Thank you guys for joining me. Thank you, Michael Zinn, for filming for us. Thank you, Tranquility Within, and everybody send good healing vibes to Dawn, our owner over here at Tranquility Within. She's just got out of the hospital, and I'm sure she could use as much good love and vibes as she can get. So everybody send some good vibes, some good prayers, and attract her health, as we've just learned. All right, guys. Pleasure to meet you.